Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay this afternoon. It is 3:30 on a Wednesday. Let me check my sound. If you guys enjoy what I'm putting down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course you can always support through Patreon or Super Chat. I am going to make a point, and I am going to do my best to reach for that point. In pursuit of reaching for that point, I'm going to sound like an asshole and I'm going to sound like a horrible person. But I'm reaching for a very specific thing, and I don't necessarily want it to be misunderstood. And so I am going to reach for it nonetheless. Rachel Maddow did a video yesterday. As Rachel Maddow was doing her show, she had to pass it over to Lawrence O'Donnell. And in passing it over to Rage Man, Lawrence O'Donnell, she couldn't get it out. She wept like Jesus and had to end the show. It was too much. It was too much. I'm gonna take a look at this, and yes, I'm joking her to some degree, and this is kind of what I mean when I say I'm gonna look like an asshole on this. But again, I'm trying to make a point. So let's take a look at it first. And this was, I showed this to my wife because I wanted somebody else's opinion. I could be somewhat callous on this stuff, and I'm going to explain why I can be callous on this stuff, and I'm going to explain that as I try to make my point. But this is Rachel Maddow's video, breaking up, not able to take the brunt of the misery as she falls apart on camera. Weaponized tears against Donald Trump.
He has just broken some new news. This has just come out from the Associated Press. This is incredible. Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children. Oh, hold on. To at least three. Can we put up the graphic of this? Thank you. Do we have it? No. 3 tender age shelters in South Texas. Lawyers and medical providers. I think I'm going to have to hand this off. Yeah. Sorry. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, where he is live in Brownsville, Texas.
We're living in different realities. We are. I watched that, and my first thought was, Rachel Maddow has tried Trump. Let me explain this part first. To give you my point of view and my context. I remember being a kid, and my dad wasn't around a lot when I was a kid, and he would come in and come out, oftentimes putting us in somewhat difficult situations, sometimes lying, even when I was ill, wasn't necessarily around. Now, that being said, most affable guy in the world, couldn't be around him and dislike him. He's just like mind-blowing personality. But for the most part, from my standpoint, he wasn't around. And as a kid, I ended up, by the time I got to 15, 16, at apathy. Apathy was easier than being angry. Apathy was where I settled. And I lived in apathy for a good little while, and I was perfectly okay with apathy. It wasn't necessarily something that I liked. There were certain things that I had expectations that I thought he should fulfill that he didn't fulfill. But apathy gets you over a hump. One of these days, he comes to the house. He comes to the house after he became ill. And mind you, this is the point. I've been ill for a while. My mom has had to deal with that stuff on her own. And he sits down. He's over my grandmother's. And he sits in a chair. And he starts to cry. And he starts to weep. And I don't know how to deal with this. My wife says I'm emotionally obtuse. I don't know what to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with those displays. And I get up and I walk outside and my mom is outside, and we're laughing. Now, this sounds callous. This sounds extremely callous. But the callousness is not something that's necessarily inherent. The callousness was created over years of interacting with the situation. Same thing here. When I looked at my dad, I thought, he's BSing. There's no way this is real. This is a BS move. He wants to curry favor. He wants to get closer. This is a BS move. Now, even if it was a BS move, the goal of trying to curry favor, the emotion behind it was somewhat real. I want to do X. I'm going to use this as a way of trying to get that particular closeness. The original intent was real. The act itself, not so much. At least I don't think it was. I could be wrong. But again, how I was not necessarily just made that way. It was built with interactions that generated a certain amount of callousness. I feel the same way about this here. And as I talked to my wife, what I realized was this is not specifically aimed at Maddow, believe it or not. I don't know if Maddow is weaponizing her tears in this case. I know she's tried Trump in Iran, Trump in Russia, Trump is a rapist or sexual abuser, Trump's grabbed women by the pussy, Trump and business dealings, Trump and his taxes. It was Trump and white supremacists, Trump and X. And she's got on her show and has done this night after night after night after night after night. Those Democrats, those heelbots who are looking for a paradigm in which to understand their world, in a world where Hillary Clinton lost, found a good friend in Rachel Maddow. Because one night after the next, she would spin one tale after the next to give them that lets them know that it wasn't that Hillary Clinton lost. It wasn't that she was a horrible candidate. It wasn't that the majority of the country hated her guts even before she ran. It was none of that. It was Trump and something else. I don't know if Rachel Maddow is weeping crocodile tears. My wife seems to believe that those are real. I don't know. What I do know, and I need to explain, there are multiple things that are true. It is true that what's taking place at the border is a moral crime. It is true that we should not be separating kids from their mothers, and our immigration system is horrendous. It is true that Donald Trump has made this worse when you have thousands of kids that have been taken away from their parents. That is repugnant. That is atrocious, to put it mildly. And I understand people being somewhat apoplectic at seeing something like that. But it's also true that this is not something where immigration policy fell off of a cliff. The last administration deported 3 million people. And those baby jails, as they're called, that people were talking about, was for-profit baby jails under the last administration. I showed the immigration lawyer that actually had that conversation with Obama. Even the policy of, we don't want these mothers to bring these kids to this country. We need to provide a disincentives. That was also under Obama. Donald Trump is not the country falling off a cliff. Donald Trump, once again, is a permutation to the right of a policy that fundamentally already, to some degree, existed. He made it worse. What I think I get annoyed by in all of this is selective outrage. Because that's what it feels to me. Selective outrage. We invest ourselves in all sorts of terrible and horrific things, and the media never says squat. Let's not pretend that the media is an objective observer, meaning what's taking place is horrific. That is true. That is very true. It is also true, however, that what was taking place, the origins of what was taking place, took place in the last administration. Those baby jails were in the last administration. It was even policy, to some degree, to take kids away from their parents in the last administration. I'm making the point to you that all of this didn't just happen now. Now the media looks at this, and with all the horrible things, one atrocious crime after the next that has taken place, they decide to focus on a specific thing. The media is not the objective view of God that looks at it all and makes a choice on the thing that's most important. It chooses. It is choosing this particular thing. The moral outrage that people are having is selective. Even if Rachel Maddow is crying because it's real, ultimately the reason that this story is focused on in this way is because media decide to focus on it in this way. It is not a passive observer. It is an active observer. I'm trying to make this point here that there are all sorts of terrible and horrible things, insignificant and great, that the media ignores, constantly ignores. The drone deaths, thousands, it ignores. The people that were selling as slaves, it ignores, especially the fact that we ourselves were the ones who were funding that stuff and assisting in having those people selling slaves in Libya. Ignores the idea that we're sending money and weapons to terrorists in another country to take the country down. It ignores all of the people that died in those processes that is doing those things. It ignores the hundred thousands of people that died during Bill Clinton's term when he was killing those babies but due to those sanctions. It completely ignores the fact that Bush killed 1 million people. It ignores all of this stuff. Terrible, horrific things. What is the horror of a person sleeping on the street without having resources to deal with their affairs? What is the toll of poverty on an individual? Having kids to feed, having things, responsibilities, debt slaves, the day after day of debt that half of the country has to deal with. I'm not minimizing what's taking place from the standpoint at the border. It is horrific. I'm just trying to make the point to you that the outrage that they're trying to instill in the population is selective, because media is not a passive observer and the things that it chooses to expand upon versus the things it chooses to minimize. This is not a defense of Trump. It's, and in fact, to some degree, it's a condemnation of the immigration system as it was in the last administration, as it is in this administration. If something happens from the standpoint of fixing immigration, good. I want it to. Donald Trump has apparently said he's reversing course on this particular policy. I don't necessarily know what that means, and I don't know what that's going to end up looking like. And yeah, there's been a large focus that's been focused on this. But my point in this is that all of these people who've been flipping out, be it on talk shows, be it politicians, all of those people have an axe to grind. They've tried all sorts of things to put into Trump's hide, and this is the thing that finally has struck gold in his woolly hide. At least I think it is. I don't know if it did in real life. Ultimately, you just have the media screaming about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that the average person cares. But nevertheless, this was the thing that finally resonated, and this was the thing that struck gold. You couldn't necessarily say dead babies, even though you could associate Trump with dead babies, but they wouldn't necessarily care. Immigrants. Weaponizing immigrants in order to attack the President of the United States. It is true what's taking place at the border is a crime. It is also true that the media is not a passive observer, and that the media is making a determination what to expand upon versus what to not expand upon. And my point to this is, whether Rachel Maddow is faking this or not, they are intentionally weaponizing this stuff from the standpoint of politics and media to go after the president. I'm not against it. Don't misunderstand me. My issue here is the selectivity to which is used when it's done. There are all sorts of things to be outraged at. We should be outraged that there are people sleeping on the street in 2018. We should be outraged that people don't have access to medication. We should be outraged that there's lead in water all throughout the country. We should be outraged at our services. We should be outraged at the things that we don't necessarily have, the gap between the public wants versus what the public can get out of the political leaders that are put into that office. And yeah, we should be outraged that they are putting babies in cages, just like they were putting babies in cages in the last administration. Trump has taken something that was there in the last administration, these for-profit baby prisons, and has expanded it to insane and ridiculous degrees. But just be aware that it was there before. This is not falling off a cliff. This is a permutation of what was already there. No, it is not the law, by the way, that you have to break up families. That's not the law. Trump is going to run into another law and trying to deal with this, seeing as you can only hold minors to a certain length of time. Look, my main point to this is there seems to be a massive amount of outrage for this. And there should be a massive amount of outrage for this. I just don't understand why the outrage is selective in the way that the outrage is partitioned out. That's all. It seems that the media focuses on certain things. And in this case, it doesn't seem like this was a passive look. This seems like it was specific to hit Trump. Again, not against it. Not against it. I just wish that the cases of suffering didn't end there. That's all. When it hits on lefty stuff, I just wish that it's not hitting on this stuff just to attack one of the other parties. In this case, the Republican Party, because they don't like Trump. But yeah, I wish it was less. Look, there are all sorts of terrors that float about, be it in this country and around the globe. Those are ignored. That's the point I'm trying to get at. And we found one particular terror that directly affects Trump, seeing as Trump is doing nasty stuff at the border. My wife says, you always say, what about the other stuff? And I tried to explain to her. I said, what about the other stuff? Because if this other stuff was going on and you ignored that other stuff, then I have to ask, why are you paying attention to this when you didn't pay attention to that? And is there other reasons that motivated you to pay attention to this as opposed to paying attention to that? So I'm not trying to sound like a prick about this, and I don't want to rag on Rich Maddow. But I do have to ask, like, why one but not the other? I can list a list of things. The story I did recently, just recently, with the Yemen men being raped in those prisons, that is horrifying. That's completely horrifying. When I'm doing stories on what's taking place in Libya, it is heart-wrenching to hear some of the cases of what's taking place in those countries and what we are doing, paying of the rapists and playing of people to undermine these countries. We are paying neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. There are so many horrible and terrible things. So many horrible and terrible things. But on this she weeps. On this she weeps. And it turns into a big story. Something else that they can use as a club to hit Donald Trump. And I'm asking, is this weaponizing of tears in order to attack the president? I suspect to some degree the answer may be yes. But does that mean she was faking it? I don't know. Hypocritical reaction by mainstream media is worse than them choosing to ignore everything. Yeah, I think that's what digs in my craw, if anything else. It feels like it's not done across the board. There are things that I find to be outrageous that we allow in our society. Those things are ignored by all stretches of the imagination. People living on the street. It's horrendous. It is societal violence, in which case that's somewhat anonymous and impersonal. And yet, it's violence nonetheless. Your society has allowed people to live on concrete because they can't afford, however you guys have arranged your system, you've let them fall through the cracks. But But that stuff gets ignored. I guess I'm saying, why does media focus on one thing but not the other? And the moment that you look at that question of why are you focusing on one and not the other, does it have anything to do with this gripe and grievance that is taking place with them screaming at Trump and Russia and Trump and Nazis and trying to find every M&M in the bag that would do it? And maybe they found one this time. It seems selective. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So you'd prefer a general protest like Occupy rather than focus outrage on single issues? It's not that simple. It's not. That's not what I'm asking, and that's not what I'm saying. If say you were in a family, and say in that family you had multiple brothers, multiple sisters, and let's say one sister steals something from you, but your dad doesn't say anything about it. Your dad pays it no mind. Your dad lets it ride, and it's not that big of a deal. Let's say one of your other brothers steals something. Your dad doesn't say anything about it. Your dad lets it ride. And then let's say you go and take something minor, and your dad flips out. And you're like, what the fuck? How are you flipping out about me? And you just let them run amok on this stuff. I'm making the point that it's not so much that they're focusing attention on this, it's the fact that they don't focus attention on other stuff. And this lens that comes across as being objective is not. It chooses what it wants to focus its attention on. And it's choosing to focus its attention on this. It's not that this is necessarily horrible. It's just that the other stuff is also horrible, and they don't focus their attention on that other stuff. That's the point that I'm getting at. The camera is not objective. The camera chooses what it wants to focus on and what it wants to emphasize. That's what I'm getting at. As for general strike, I would love for something like a general strike. I don't know if people would do it. I would love for the solidarity of all these groups, not just for immigration, but also for environmental justice, for Black Lives Matter, Hispanic lives, all that stuff. I want all of those groups to be united, arm in arm, because ultimately what those groups are fighting for is exactly the same thing. The lens may be different. The way they look at it may be different because they may be fighting their specific section or their specific arm. But none of that stuff gets accomplished without dealing with the entity itself, meaning the way the system is organized itself. You will never, ever, you will fail magnificently on environmental work if you don't necessarily realize that the billions of dollars that are going into the oil companies is going to be the thing that keeps the oil companies going. It's going to remain profitable because there's somebody out there that's going to want to be able to make that cash. It's the organization that propels a lot of these issues, not the issues themselves. You can't solve those at the source of the problem. Sometimes you have to solve those things at a deeper level. The deeper level in this case is the way to which we are arranged. I would prefer all of us to be arm in arm. All of us. But look, I understand the single issue thing. I guess I'm trying to say, I'm talking about this from a meta level. Don't look at this for the moment from the standpoint of the horror that's taking place. Acknowledge the horror that's taking place because it is. Also acknowledge that this is a permutation of what was taking place prior. Meaning the edifice was in place. And in some cases, Obama was also using those baby prisons in order to deter people from coming to the country. It is not falling off of a cliff. It is a slide from what was there. One president being the extension of another. This is kind of what I keep saying. I want to nail this down. I'm looking at this from a meta level. And I'm asking the question from the standpoint of why does media choose to focus on one thing but not the next? What is that motivation? What is the reason for that lens? Why does it choose this versus the other? And I'm asking this from the standpoint of chaos and national outrage. I don't understand it. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of somebody who, for the first time, as they do news, look at what I consider to be hysteria surrounding the country. The hysteria may be warranted, by the way, but I think this hysteria is warranted on a host of stuff, which is my confusion. I don't understand why this lens, which looks subjective, chooses to focus on this item, but not this item. And why does it choose so much emphasis on this, but not this? I don't understand, which is why I'm bringing this up. I'm not outright saying Maddow was faking it. I am asking, why was media focusing on this in the first place for Maddow to be this wrapped up into it? Those are somewhat different questions. Let's see. Did Maddow cry over Obama's drone murders? I forget, Bashar al-Assad. This is kind of my point, Bashar. You're making my point. I don't want the emotional responsibility that comes from a serious relationship. That's why I just stay fun friends until I'm ready. Fun friends is fun. My wife wasn't going to tolerate that, though. I'm more libertarian in a lot of this stuff. But I understand that not everybody is that way. And so I end up having to meld myself into what society wants, whether I want to do it or not. In an odd way, relationships were similar fashion. Darren Levy, Mad Cow is owned and controlled by her corporate owners. She has no morals. I'm not on the wavelength. So when I look at that, I don't see sincerity. I see this person is weaponizing this kind of emotional response, piling on with everybody screaming about this. I've screamed about this, by the way, because I think this is fucking horrible. I thought it was horrible when Obama deported 3 million also, though. Edward Bernays has your answer to why question, Jabal. Belogo Pogo, I'm asking it kind of rhetorically, but yeah, Bernays, the father of propaganda. Yeah. Hillary claimed in WikiLeaks email she summoned Eleanor Roosevelt from the dead and was speaking to her ghost. What? Beltazar 228. Even if she was, it'd take another 20 years for her to be old enough to actually do something. Just then, President Trump signs executive order on keeping families together. I just saw that in Washington Post. I'm going to do that video next. In an odd way, that's a condemnation on us. A Republican president has literally been pushed by the public itself, based on hysteria whipped up by media, to change course. What would happen if the same thing happened to poverty? What do you know? Trump's tear. Trump cried too. Trump needs to weep on the podium and blame Democrats. That would be hilarious. That would be hilarious. One reality show battling the next for sincerity. The battle for sincerity. The battle for sincerity. Oh, Beltazar. She's crying because she can't connect it to Russia yet. That's hilarious. What still needs to be answered is, did we already have established detention centers? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. I showed that the other day where the guy confronted Obama on those baby jails. And Obama said, we need to stop the people from coming here. We don't want to provide an incentive for people to come to the country and bring those babies to the country. Hillary Clinton said, we need to send them back. We need to send them back. They existed before Trump. They existed before Trump. She went on Twitter to apologize for crying on air. I said, everything Trump does is your fault for lying about Bernie's. Yeah, Bernie Kratz. Resist your overlords. Resist your overlords. Look into the live stream alerts. It may be a better way to keep track of super chats. If you get a bunch, it also keeps track of new subs. Well, thank you, Beltazar. I always tend to look at the bottom, but sometimes I think the video is so fast that people weren't paying attention. But I looked at the bottom in this one, so I did catch it. I appreciate the help, guys. I mean, I always appreciate the help with the super chats or the patrons. They help keep the show moving along. YouTube has taken an axe to revenue just from the way they've gone about demonetizing videos that they don't particularly like. They demonetize videos before the videos even start. They would be like, we don't like this. You said Laura Steiner was a boss, and we don't know what that means, so we're just going to demonetize that video. It's amazing. Maddow did have Jeremy Scahill on to criticize Obama drones for It's I think our thing is, and the term flying killer robots. I got from Maddow. Flying killer robots is an awesome description of the drone program. So I don't necessarily fault her as an absolute. My issue is, let's stop pretending that Democrats is an answer. That's all. And when you look at MSNBC, the implicit assumption is that Republicans are bad and Democrats are somehow your saviors. And I am here to say they're not. They're not. They're not at all. I'm invisible. Look at the mainstream media here in the United States as a state-sanctioned propaganda machine, and everything makes sense. Why does the mainstream media choose who and what they want you to be outraged about? Control. Yeah. I think this is kind of the point I'm trying to make here. Mainstream media is making a choice, and there's this odd collusion between media and politics. You had situations where Hillary Clinton was sending certain stories into the media or seeding those stories into the media to get those things out so they can use to attack the opposition. Both parties do it, so let's not be shocked by it. The media, for the most part, replicates this idea of what the government is saying. Either anonymous sources that were spooks prior in the last administration, or sources in this administration, meaning many of the sources that they use for the most part are just state sanctioned or surrounding issues of state from one of the parties. It's like, what's true? Who knows? We just focus on what we're told. I'm skeptical of the outrage stuff. I really am. I absolutely am. So now they're going to build temporary housing for tens of thousands of refugee families on the border, but homelessness in the United States is ignored. I'd much rather be in the GOP position with state and local legislatures and not win Congress than in the opposite. If you get 38, it doesn't matter what Congress and President do. Amendments H.O. Technocrat 78. Objectivity and reason are important factors in reporting. Yeah, it is, but the problem is you often get from the standpoint of state, like CNN, state said this. Some spook said this. Well, that's what's true. Not what some spook said motivated by something that's taking place with the parties. What's true. And oftentimes you don't necessarily get what's true. When you look at other media from other countries, especially when they're looking at something that's taking place here, sometimes you get an alternate story of events. Also, when you think about some of that stuff, logically, sometimes the public events doesn't follow. This is kind of besides the point. I'm asking somewhat of a larger question from the standpoint of why on earth do they choose one thing over another? I'm asking this from the standpoint that is in the middle of a hysteria here in the country about Russia and now with immigration. And immigration was a problem in the last administration. It's a problem in this administration. I'm also asking, how does the media lens choose to focus on what? And it seems like it's not non-biased. It seems like it's focusing on things based on, in an odd way, you could say some degree of party loyalty. But why does it choose one issue over another? Why not lead in the water? That seems like a really big idea. I mean, you have people in this country drinking lead-laced water. Why isn't that a big deal? Why isn't the poverty population in California where people are living on the streets? How about the people who don't have Medicare or social or health care? I'm making this point that of all the horrors that we are accustomed to, the rapes in Yemen, the fact that we're sending those people money and resources, the fact that we're paying terrorists in other countries, is selling Africans. and we were responsible for it. Why the outrage over one but not the other? That's what I don't understand. And looking in the middle of this, it doesn't seem like the lens is purely objective. It expands and contracts depending upon something. The question is, what is the something that the lens depend on when it goes from one story to the next? This is not a critique of the people going after Trump in this. It's more so a critique of how do you choose one story versus another. That's what I don't understand. So I hope that makes sense. This is not me having to go at what's taking place with Trump. Trump had no business doing that. And let's be honest, politically, it's fucking stupid strategy. Utterly stupid strategy. You have Democrats are able to show images of kids being ripped away from their parents. Literally ripped away from their parents. How do you think why did you think that they would play politically in any context? Whatever you guys want to think of Trump, his political acumen is non-existent. And that guy beat Hillary Clinton. That's so sad. That's so sad. Do you agree with locking up children or not? I don't agree with locking up children. I don't. But I didn't agree with it in the last term either. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, Danny. I'm when Obama was shipping 3 million kids away, or 3 million people away, where was the outrage? I guess I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it. It pays its base. MSNBC doesn't have a lens. It has a kaleidoscope, and all paths lead to Russia. What's funny? To use the locking up of children to mock somebody's personal feelings because you're upset about the 2016 election is cruel. It's not justice. So, Zeke, this is what I would agree with you on. There are two reasons that Donald Trump is doing this. One is to use it to essentially go after Democrats because he thinks that this will somehow give him some kind of leg up in any kind of negotiation with Democrats. Again, that's nonsense. That's zero political acumen because that was going to be used to club him over the heads. Look, Democrats have used immigration as somewhat of a club. I mean, they've kicked this can down the road because they can use this can knowing what the Republican base is like. The Republican base has bit off more than it can chew. This looks horrendous. You are literally, understand what I'm saying, you are literally taking babies away from their mamas. And Democrats and people who are around and good-natured people listening to these kids wailing and crying as thick-necked border guards must give me your goddamn kid. That's the image that you get. Explain that politically. How does that play politically to anybody? You may have some people who are hateful who thinks that's okay. And fact is, I would love to get those people. If I was a Democrat, honestly, I would love to have those people on camera all the time. I would push CNN, hey, talk to that guy, talk to that guy, talk to that guy. And one hateful person after the next, and you tie those people to Donald Trump and say, these are the people who are pushing for those kids to be in baby prisons. You should have never pushed through that strategy. The moment that you said Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers, any strategy on immigration was going to be hit with this level of, this guy's a racist and this guy's putting through a racist policy and he's taking people to concentration camps. And by the way, it has the virtue of being true. It's a virtue of being true. The crazy part is, Democrats are not going to give you anything because the longer this takes place, the worse it looks for you. This idea that they care about immigrants in any way or they're going to yield their position on it is nonsense. All the political incentives leave them to just leave it. This is your mess. You have the House, the Senate, Supreme Court, presidency. Fix it. Fix it. The other part to this is deterrence. He believes that if you make immigration horrendous, that you can deter people from coming here. But the fact is, when people are fleeing war zones, rape, torture, criminality, gangs, they're coming from hellish scenarios. For them to even make that trip, they're coming from hellish scenarios. You're not going to deter them. The logic that he's using for this, it doesn't even work. So this is bad on both counts. But again, my argument here has nothing to do with what's taking place from the standpoint of Trump. It has everything to do with why does one get emphasized but the other doesn't. It's somewhat of a question of media. This kind of meta question of media. So I do declare, Jeff Sessions and Lindsey, I do declare Graham are despicable devils. Agreed. They're riding the DSA protest now with media framing DSA as a ragtag group versus party, or mentioning them at the very end, just downplay them to avoid showing real contrast between the DSA and Democratic resistance. Did you see that video with them going after Secretary of Homeland Security? Oh man! God, that was awesome. God, that was awesome. If the kids can't eat in peace, you can't either. God, I love it. I love it. Tabitha Enriquez, I mean, fix it for TPTB can profit off of detention. Listen to what she's saying. Essentially, Trump, they're for-profit baby prisons. Meaning, you may have people paying money to try to incentivize Trump to put more people in these baby prisons. It's amazing. The shame chanting bugs me, but I love the rest of it. What's wrong with shame? I love shame. I love shame. 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 It even feels good to say it. Shame. Shame. I could express my moral outrage. Trump won't fix it because we might see what they're doing behind the curtain. No, I don't think he's going to fix it. But I do think he's trying to hold it ransom. Republicans, well, at the very least, try to make it less horrendous because right now it's too much attention. It's too much attention. Trump just signed an executive order to stop family separation. See, right there. Dawn's beats, yeah. Harvesting children for sheer greed and profit make money. Jason Meteors, like and sub, homies. Aw, thanks, man. Trump is like an infected wound turning red. We just now have all times to act. Democrats are holding the issue as ransom as well. Yeah, but here's the difference. This is self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted. Donald Trump rides down the gold escalator and with all the horrendousness of a person says Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers. I assume a few are nice people. This is a massive thing. And people say, well, that doesn't mean he's racist. And I say, what does it mean? He's assuming that the entirety of Mexico is somehow rapists and drug dealers with a few being nice people. What is he using to make that assertion? Yeah, I think his knuckles dragging. So that person with the knuckles dragging in the White House turns around and makes a policy that allows them to rip kids from their parents to use as a deterrent for people coming into the country. Some of these people fleeing war zones and crimes and criminality and gangs, horrendous conditions. And they get to the United States, the shining city on the hill, and we say, give me your babies. Give me your babies. We're going to put these in a baby cage and we're going to send you off to a concentration camp. And we're going to use the prisons, or we're going to let private prisons make a profit off of the fact that you're there. That's what we have. That's fucking horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. Yeah, that's horrendous. Zeke sounds like someone with common sense as opposed to everyone else. What is Zeke saying? I don't use children to mock somebody's personal feelings because I don't like news coverage. That's not progressivism. What about it is progressive? I didn't mock her feelings. And my point is, I don't even know if her feelings are real. That's my point. And my point is, this idea of over-emotionality when you're analyzing news, I would ask the question, why is news being focused in a particular way? But I'm not mocking her feelings. I am questioning whether or not those feelings are real. So it's a difference in those things. Darren, yes, you did. Okay, sure I did. Oh, because I said she weeps like Jesus. Fair enough. Weeps like Jesus. Fair enough. Yeah, because I don't know if her feelings are real. So, call it whatever you want to call it. Is what it is. Tabitha Enriquez, they said over and over grabbing criminals, but have always grabbed more workers and students than criminals. Well, they've gotten rid of that particular thing of just trying to grab criminals. Obama, for the most part, was saying we're just going to grab people who are bad guys. Trump grabbed anybody. He didn't care. He said, "What feelings, Zig?" Yeah, I don't. He's in his own feelings. I would mock her feelings because they aren't real. Yeah, that's assuming that they're real. Z called you a fake progressive. Okay. He has his feelings. That's fine. These people are not all Mexicans. Many are from Honduras. This whole thing about barring Americans. And by the way, this thing of somebody is a fake progressive, I gotta be honest, this is somewhat stupid. Somebody creates a standard and then said this person's not living up to the standard. I go with the logic of humanitarianism. You're assuming that I know Rachel Maddow feelings are real. I don't know her feelings are real at all. I am not on a wavelength. So this to me doesn't seem real. It seems like weaponized tears. So if I'm joking her, I'm joking her. Yeah, I am. Honduras got beaten up by us. It's sick. Clinton, the person who she supported, didn't cry about it, had Honduras essentially assisted in a coup in that country. Then Clinton gets on a debate stage and lies about it. Again, nobody cared about that. Nobody cried about that. Balthazar, one person's bad guys, another person's terrorists. That is also true. Rachel Maddow wipes her tears with bags of money and condones beats. That's hilarious. Buster Peak, Rachel gets paid $30,000 a day not to have feelings. I don't know if she doesn't have feelings. Look, my point in this is I don't know if what taking place here is real. And whether it's real or not. I ask this question from the standpoint of meta-narrative on the media. What makes them focus on one terror but not another? I don't know that. A dingo ate my baby. Cry me a river, mad cow. Will be all right within $30,000 a day. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, and Bernie Sanders voted for Libya. Every politician running besides Trump was responsible for starting some type of war. That makes it right? That makes it right? That makes it a good thing? Yeah, okay. Anyone want to explain why Bernie refuses to endorse fellow independent Canova over Democrat Waltzman Schultz, who rigged the primary against him? Thank you for the planet. I have no idea. I have no clue. I have no idea. When what's his name went through California, I remember Laura Steiner was like, Sanders didn't endorse anybody in that race either. Ro Khanna make the point that he says Sanders doesn't really endorse people like talking about. It's few and far between. And Ro Khanna says, I'm going to take him up on that because I think it may be a good idea in order to stay out of these kind of political buzzsaws. I don't know. Only thing I can think of is maybe Sanders wants to be able to get work done in Congress and he feels he needs this kind of interaction in order to be able to do it. I don't know. I came late and rewound this vid, so my something. Jamal, did you see the ET article, right, about Bernie Sanders and how Bernie now going to vote? Yes, I did see that. Chris Hedges. Well, Chris Hedges, just before the election, Chris Hedges said he had a conversation with Sanders, and he was like, if Sanders is not willing to challenge the system, then Sanders is not necessarily going to be able to, I guess you can say, be a bulwark against the party. And he's skeptical that Sanders can change the party. If someone agree with him, in order to affect this kind of interaction, he's had to bend. The question becomes, do you bend so much where you just kind of lose the virtue of who you are? Or Is that what you need to do to get along and able to affect your agenda? Chris Hedges has gone after him, so. J. Scott, I am Solar. Who else is calling them concentration camps? I've seen them refer to concentration camps on Fox. Well, I call them concentration camps. I mean, you've essentially taken somebody to a private prison. We won't call it a prison, a camp. What is the other name for it? The internment camps? Whatever you want to call it, the name is the same. Ultimately, you've taken somebody and put them in camps and put them in prisons, work, in some of these cases, trying to get them to work for like 8 cents on the dollar. It's fucking horrendous. Internment camps, yeah. Is it a private prison? Yeah, Buster Peak is a private prison. Internment camps like we did in the Japanese, yeah. Look, when people are using internment camps or concentration camps, they're trying to make this point of, they're trying to give this thing of, they're trying to give this image of harkening back to World War II. What we did to Japan, what the Japanese used to say. I've heard Democrats refer to them as concentration camps too, but of course they're going to do that because they're trying to take the piss out of them. Jamala, we should call private prisons as slavery. That is what it is. John Doe. I think I've called them 8 cents away from slavery, something to that effect. We should not have private prisons. And the last thing we should be doing is supporting them. So yeah. Trump is funny, but at times offensive. Cartman from South Park presidency. Oh yeah. See, I didn't watch South Park. Prophet's Bane. Difference, the Japanese internment camps didn't separate their families. I think that's worse. People said Prophet's Bane differences. Yeah, we didn't separate them from their families. That's even worse. That means in the internment camps and when we were separating the Japanese, we at least let them stay with their kids. Yeah, that's horrible. A dingo and my baby. The president is the head of the party. Democrats will never allow Bernie or anyone like him to win 4 more years of Trump for fundraising. I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know if it's a let type thing, if that makes sense. It's possible. You could be right, but I'm not going to go into the process cynical. Canada isn't looking so bad these days. Hey. Tim Canova has personally suggested Bernie doesn't want to endorse independent candidates to maybe avoid them blacklisted or rigged against them. Also, could be used against him in 2020. My thought was always that he was scared to tread that way because he didn't want the party to ostracize him, because he feels like he needs party support in order to run. That was my thought, but I wasn't certain. But yeah, he didn't endorse Tim Canova. He didn't endorse him. The wild part about it is he endorsed them once and then turned around and didn't endorse him a second time. He said, I don't know who he is. First G7 country to legalize cannabis. Oh, Canada. Oh, Canada is right. Tia Wheeler. No one is saying that Sanders didn't vote for these conflicts, but the fact is they didn't give a pass for Clinton. Sanders did vote for the conflicts, but there is a difference between Bernie Sanders coming out saying, I think some of these wars are illegal, based on what the typical party line is. Yeah. Will Pelosi, Schumer, or Feinstein still be in office in 2020? Well, yes, but the question is, will Pelosi, if Democrats take the House, will Pelosi be in power? And that we don't know. We don't know. There's a lot of people who are saying they won't vote for Pelosi to be leader if the Democrats take the House. We don't know. We don't know. Democrats only complain about wars in hindsight. Yeah, we hate that stuff in hindsight. Oh, we care about sexism in hindsight. When Bill Clinton was a rapist, nobody cared. Yeah. Balthazar, Democrats decried Trump. We need to kill their families. Reminding me again of the drone wars. Kill 90% civilians. Yeah. Yeah, who are you killing? Yeah. It's funny. What's his name? I think, was it Brennan? Came out and made this just profound lie, saying that Obama needed near certainty before using drones. It's nonsense! Nonsense! There were times where 90% of that stuff, they were killing civilians for like a 5-month spread. Nonsense. Nonsense. I'm guessing Bernie proudly voted for Hillary. Oh, Pat. You're hurting me, Pat. Republicans only have one majority, making 51, so to say they can fix it with a filibuster 60 rule is asinine. They can fix what with a filibuster? Jamal, did you hear about the EU Parliament breaking the internet today? I did not hear about that. They broke the internet. How did they break the internet? It's in progressive interest for the Democrats' hack blue wave to fail. If they do, no change. So that's interesting, right? I remember having a talk with Glenn about this, the one at the radio station. And I asked him, I was like, "You're a lefty?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Your political leanings are similar to my own." And we started talking about what's coming up in 2018, meaning the elections. And I went to him like a person goes to a priest, because I wanted to talk to him and see somebody else's opinion on this. I've taken the stance of solidarity of no, meaning stop voting for people who are not representing your interests, because nothing changes and nothing gets done if they believe that your vote is this kind of perfunctory thing that's just handed over. He's been doing the radio stuff for a lot longer than I have, and he's been in politics a lot longer than I have. And so I was curious to hear what somebody else who was in this particular field thought about it. And I explained to him, when Martin Luther King was walking on that bridge to Selma, I would imagine he looked down and he saw those cops, and he knew that they were going to take a beating, and he kept walking. My point in that is, there's always a lift that takes place in order to get anything real accomplished. Meaning, he went to take the beating because taking the beating was the thing that drew public attention, drew eyes on what was taking place. Oh my God, I didn't realize they were beating darkies this way. I had no idea. My thinking is, on the solidarity of no thing, there are consequences to the solidarity of no. So, in the same way you have people getting beat, shot, killed, just for the temerity of being treated as an equal citizen or equal person. Solidarity of no goes full well into this model of you have nowhere else to go and tries to break that model. The strategy is literally trying to break the model of you have nowhere else to go and try to wrestle control of this idea of it is not the party that controls the human beings. It is the people themselves who control the party, and the people who are in those parties are going to be avatars of those public's will, not the other way around. Not the DCCC putting their finger on the scale on who they want to put into that office. Not the DCCC telling people to get out of the race. But the people themselves, in a grassroots way, choose who they want to be in office. That they choose. They make a choice about putting who they want in office to represent their interests. Not the other way around. Not the other way around. This argument of you have nowhere else to go is based on this idea of the party looking at the populace saying, we are going to maintain our workable point of view, and you have nowhere else to go. The other guy is a raving lunatic. You have nowhere else to go. That model needs to be broken. My point was the solidarity of no. The saying, if you don't represent my interests, you don't get my vote. These votes are no longer perfunctory. My issue with this is 2018 is a census year, meaning the gerrymandering and everything else is going to be up for grabs, if I'm not mistaken, in this term, just like it was during Obama's term. If Democrats lose, they also lose any capacity to change the gerrymandering that's taking place. If they win, however, they may be able to affect the gerrymandering, but any potential change goes away. You've essentially said you can fail miserably, and after failing miserably, after losing 1,100 seats, just by screaming Trump and Russia, and in this case, Trump and immigrants, you somehow are able to obfuscate and ignore the actual problems that are facing human beings from the standpoint on issues of class. If they are allowed to do that, then the strategy of you have nowhere else to go bears fruit. And they end up back in office, not on a platform, not with anything real to show for it, but ultimately just based on this idea of doubling down with Trump and Russia. That is not something I want to reward them for. And yet at the same token, it feels like there's a hit to take in order to try to make that point that you will not prosper just by putting hacks in that office. Meaning, putting Joe Manchin in that office, I would prefer Joe Manchin to lose. I would prefer him to lose. Why do you need another Republican in that office? Why? So, his opinion was similar to mine, but he essentially said, look, we've allowed this country to go too far. And because we've allowed it to go so far down this particular dark road, in order to go back and change it, somebody has to take a hit. Just like somebody had to take a hit back then in civil rights, or workers' rights, or women's rights. So, any thoughts about the United States putting sanctions on China, made in China 2025 sector of activities? Any thoughts on China's militarization of the South China Sea? I'm always tripped out by the militarization thing. We spend $1 trillion on the military. China is militarizing the South China Sea, but imagine the standpoint of us from the standpoint of South America. We looked at everything that took place in South America as being our sphere of influence, even though these were other countries. We had many of these countries to be vassal states of the United States imperial interests. How on earth are we telling China what they should do in that part of the world? And the reason they're militarizing it is because if they don't, we will. Like the whole idea that they feel pressured and threatened about whether or not they can control that sphere pushes them to be more militaristic in that sphere. To them, we need to defend this particular point to which we have ascribed as being our own. It is pretty rich that we're telling somebody else that they're being overly militarized. That's pretty rich. Look, the issue with the South China Sea is going to have to be dealt with through negotiation, like any other issue. Ultimately, it can't be all of us and none of them, and vice versa. Any deal is going to have to deal with justice and peace, meaning you're going to have a certain amount of fairness that both parties, to some degree, are going to have to agree on. The militarization is almost, you can make an argument to some degree, a political statement. We will defend our interests. We will defend our interests. And they've determined that this is their interests. The islands that they're making there and militarizing or upping the military on those islands is because they feel that they need to defend what they consider to be their interests. What are we going to do about it? Are we really going to go to war to China over something with the South China Sea? Or are we going to be willing to enter some level of negotiation? The thing is, though, I would imagine they would look at the South China Sea in the same way we would look at the waters near America. Let me say it this way. The militarization is because they believe they need the militarization. It's not just we're doing it willy-nilly. It's not happening in a vacuum. It's happening because they feel they need it, if that makes sense. If they didn't feel they needed to do it, if they didn't feel that that land or that island or that area was going to be taken, they wouldn't do it. Like I feel about the militarization is this failure of communication, and the China thing is weird. So I think 50% of the companies or the revenue of the stuff that comes into the United States is from United States companies coming from China. Companies ship their job overseas and they're able to cut them out, that they pay their workers in which case they can ship the product completed back into the country to be sold at somewhere like Walmart or something to that effect. We have a strange relationship with China on this. And I gotta be honest, I don't know how that's going to be worked out. I would say that it's either going to be worked out through talking or through other means. So, Jamal, could you do a video on the Bilderberg Hickenlooper to be the Democratic president of 2020? I don't know who that is. Bilderberg Hickenlooper. I'll check him out. Bilderberg Hickenlooper. Jamal, basically it's a pot calling Nick Kettle Black. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't see him. Build the wall, no more Pizzagate kids. Colorado governor. Okay. Colorado governor. Let's see. Putting my money on Vermin Supreme next election. Vermin Supreme? What is Vermin Supreme? Alright. How about the United States leaving the Human Rights Council? Oh, geez. That's a video in and of itself, man. Those things are videos in and of itself. Alright. I'm going to end this because I want to do Prime Minister questions before it gets too late. It's almost at 5 o'clock. So, I will see you guys probably in like 10-15 minutes. Thank you guys for all stopping by. I'll see you shortly. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. And let me make sure. Okay, good. I don't have any more. Alright, guys. I'm still angry that the only choice for Colorado governor on the 26 who support Medicare for all also voted for Bush tax fetus. Bush tax fetus. You know, the Bush tax cut stuff. However mad you want to be at it, Obama enshrined 80% into law. So Democrats couldn't think too bad about it. They didn't try to repeal them or get rid of them. So, alright guys, I'm going to end this here. Yeah, Rachel Maddow weeping on camera. I don't know if it's real. Could be, maybe not. But I do ask, why? Why does it emphasis on one but not the other? And by the other, I just mean other tragedies. What causes a tragedy to get the emphasis as opposed to others? I'm fascinated by that. I'm curious about that. I'm sitting here watching people flip out over this, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty horrible. But why is this more horrible than that? I don't understand it. So, I'll leave it. Alright guys, you all have a good one. Don't disagree with Jay Scott or your Republican Russian bot fanboy. Yeah, it's not necessarily the most dignified of political positions. But it's fine, whatever. He comes, he watches. I appreciate it. Alright guys.